What's up, everybody? This Pitch is back for another movie review, and this time I am reviewing, if you haven't guessed already, Pitch Perfect 3. There was a bit of mixed feelings for this movie, where, you know, a lot of people liked it, a lot of people didn't like it. Some people thought that it didn't meet up to the expectations they were hoping for. It wasn't quite as good as the other two installments, but we will get into this movie review right away. There will be spoilers, but I will warn you before we get into them, so don't worry, you don't have to mute me or skip me yet, but there will be a point in time where you will. As usual, they do open up the movie with the whole Universal fanfare a cappella melody that they do. That is the same with the other two movies. It shows right away what movie you're watching if you didn't know. Just like with Star Wars and the scrolling text, this one gives you the a cappella introduction of the Universal theme. Another thing that they ended up doing with this movie was they Tarantino'd it. And if you don't know what that means, it means they showed you something that happens later on in the film, and then they go back to be like, okay, now here's how we got there. And then they show all the events that lead up to this point that they started the movie off with. Seeing what's happening right at the very beginning, I was very confused because I was not sure what was going on and how anything was happening in this movie led up to this point. It made sense somewhat when watching the movie, but first seeing, I'm like, what is happening? Are we in the right movie? DJ Khaled is in this movie. He does play himself, but a more like amped up version of himself, to the point where he's kind of overacting. There is a new character that is introduced that is a very obvious love interest for one of the other characters. The song set list was pretty good. I think maybe the songs could have been a little bit better, but for the most part, they were actually pretty decent. I knew most of the songs. There were a couple songs I was like, what is this? I've never heard this before. But I'm open to hearing new things. However, it could have been brought up a little bit just to keep, you know, the musical aspect a little more intriguing and attention-grabbing. But that's just me. As tradition with every movie, they did the riff-off. That also could have gone a little better, in my opinion. It's an overdone thing that they should have stopped after number 1. Maybe bring it for number 2 to test it out, but they really should have stopped it after 2. The fact that they brought it into 3, yeah, it showed that they're still doing their old things, but it didn't come across as good as it should have. Rebel Wilson as Fat Amy was hilarious as always. She's constantly bringing one punchline after the next, after the next, after the next. It's always funny to see her in this movie. She's always over the top in a good way. And some of the things that she did in this movie was very shocking, but also equally amazing. Anna Kendrick as Becca is flawless as always. She always puts on like a great persona for this character. She's constantly looking at her finest. There's one point in the movie she wears like a little jumpsuit fancy thing with her hair nice and straight. I was just like, bitch, work it. During the movie, there was also a point where a character meets someone from their past. And I found that this could have been explored a little more. I feel like they kind of just introduced this person and then they moved on, so that way we could get to like the twist of it, rather than exploring more about the past and how these two characters kind of got distant, and how they're kind of rekindling what they had. But the fact that they didn't do that kind of just made it seem a little rushed, and just wanted to kind of get through this part to kind of keep the movie going. I find if they would have added more information about it, the movie would have been a bit better than what it was. And then with that, there should have been more of an insight, more of an exploration, more of a, just more information given between Pitch Perfect 2 and this one, to know where the characters went and what they were doing. They showed everything that they were doing, but it was very like 5-second clips of each character, kind of like, oh, this is what Becca did, and this is what Amy did, and this is what Chloe did. It's like boom, 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 boom. It showed what they were doing, but they could have gone a little deeper into it because it was just very fast paced, and it was like, okay, here's information, now move on, because we need to get the story going. Which I understand that they're doing that, but they need to explore their characters and flush them out a little bit more, because really they're still a little two-dimensional, except for Becca. Becca's probably the only one by this point that's very, like, explored. She's the most explored character in my opinion, and mainly because the first movie was completely about her, and then the second movie was like her, Amy, and Chloe, and then this movie is more about Amy and a little bit about Becca. There's a little bit about Aubrey in this one, but Becca and Chloe have about the same amount of information kind of given to you for this movie. Amy is basically the star of this movie. So that put a little neat twist on things as well, getting out of the norm, making Becca not in the spotlight, though I wish she still was. The ending of the movie was a nice, subtle, emotional ending. It was a good send-off to end the franchise. They didn't amp it up too much, which I liked. They didn't throw all of this emotional stuff, and they kept it like filled with humor, so that way people who could get emotional, like super emotional, would still be able to like enjoy it and not just feel like sad and awful that it ended. But now let's get into a little bit of spoilers. So if you don't want to hear, mute me or skip until you get to the spoiler-free zone. With that said, we are now entering the spoiler zone. So as I said, everyone's life pretty much seems crappy. Amy has no job. Becca quit her job because she couldn't have her creative freedom to do what she wanted as a producer. Chloe is training to be a vet, but she's like sticking her entire arm up a cow's ass. And she's desperate for love. You have, oh my god, I can't remember her name. You have Esther Dean's character, who is training to be a pilot, but she keeps crashing the plane. They end up going to a reunion that Emily invited the Bellas to, and she used reunion so everyone got dressed up thinking that they're going to perform, but really they kind of got pushed aside for the new Bellas, which is Emily and then a bunch of other random people. And so basically the original Bellas feel like they're done. They've had their run, which, like, this franchise has had its run. And they kind of feel left out, forgotten, unworthy. So they feel sad, and then they plan a trip with the help of Aubrey and her father to go and perform with 3 other groups at like an army tour to see who gets picked to open up for DJ Khaled. And then, you know, you still have the usual jokes from John and Gail, who are now following the Bellas around making a documentary that's awful. The Bellas start off the competition pretty badly. No one really wants them around just because they're the only a cappella group, whereas the other 3 are using instruments. By the end of the movie, the Bellas finish off strong. Amy meets her father again, who she ran away from when she was 18. So here's a little backstory for Amy. Again, could have been a little flushed out more, but they did what they did. He ends up kidnapping all of the Bellas except for Becca, who was in a meeting with DJ Khaled, and Amy, who didn't meet up with the Bellas yet. Her father kidnaps them because Amy refused to give him money because she found out that she has like $1.8 million saved in a bank account on the Cayman Islands. And so he kidnaps them all, and the scene that Rebel Wilson does on the ship that he holds them hostage is amazing. It's just this long action sequence where she goes in and she just kicks some serious ass. She, think Melissa McCarthy in Spy amped up to 11. She's kicking, punching, throwing, headbutting to a point where she like hits a guy and then she brings her foot behind her over her head and kicks the guy in front of her in the head to make him fall and die. She has a pan and spatula against a knife fight in a kitchen, throwing wasabi and doing like purple nurple, so there's the humor in it as well. And then she blows up a ship after running away from it. It was amazing. I would gladly go and see this movie again, A, because of the humor that is involved in the movie, but B, just for the action sequence alone, because it was awesome. Also, we find out that Khaled doesn't actually want the Bellas to open up for him. He only wants Becca. Amy tells the Bellas, and we find out that they are, because they're pretty much her family, they're there to support her. As I said, critically, this movie was the worst one out of the three, unfortunately. It did have its run, it really did, but it was still good for what it was. I went in with like an open mind, a neutral kind of stance on the movie, and I came out relatively pleased with it. The previous ones are a lot better. They did have more of a storyline, they did have more character development for certain characters, but this one was a pretty good ending to the whole trilogy. In my opinion, though, I feel like Pitch Perfect 3 was a lot better than Star Wars The Last Jedi. And it's because they had 3 storylines, but they were all in a sequence that you could easily follow. You had the Amy storyline, you had the Becca storyline, and you had the Bella storyline. There's 3, and you were able to follow each and every single one of them because they mashed and blended perfectly. Pitch Perfect 3 could have also done a little better if it had have been either early December rather than the end of December, or in like the second week of January. They probably would have had a better box office, but because it was coming out a week or 2 after Star Wars, they lost all of that money that they could have had, and it was just poor timing. But overall, I would definitely give this movie about a 7.5 out of 10, so that would be about a B. So I do recommend that you do go and see this movie. If you like some action, if you like some comedy, do go and see it because it is good. So, hope you like this movie review. I will see you next week with another movie review where I will be reviewing Insidious: The Last Key. I will see you next week. Be sure to subscribe to my channel for weekly videos. Be sure to check out last week's video where I review Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and be sure to check out my playlist of other movie reviews. Give this a like, share it around, and I will see you next week. Bye, guys! Yeah.